Welcome to Man in Progress, Forging Manhood. I'm Travis Murray, values coach and your guide to building a life driven by real values. Each week we explore what it means to be a man today, talk about and to thinkers and doers who've been through it, and give you steps to show up better for yourself and those you love. If you're ready to forge your own path, you're in the right place. Let's get to it. You ever notice how the heaviest weights aren't the ones at the gym? The barbell doesn't talk back or leave dishes in the sink. The real weight lives in your chest, tucked behind your sternum. It's the ache that sets in before you open your eyes. It's the tension you feel when you hear your child call your name and you're not sure which version of yourself is going to answer. That's the weight we're talking about today. And if that sounds like hyperbole, you either haven't been paying attention or you're blessed to be oblivious. Also, if you haven't heard the last 18 episodes, think of those as a warm-up. Because today, we step up to the new bar. Let's talk about what you faced in the last 18 episodes. You forged courage by facing your anger, hammered out loyalty by standing in truth, and learned how to quench yourself so you don't crack under pressure. I talked about polishing your edges, building a sheath to protect what matters, and joining a brotherhood that doesn't require fake badges or secret handshakes. Together, we explored how noise can forge character, how to stand in who you are, and what it means to speak truth to power without burning the whole house down. Those episodes weren't random. They were steps in a journey. And together, they charted your journey from raw iron to tempered steel. They taught you how to hold a hammer, how to strike, when to plunge yourself into the water, and when to rest. Today, we pull all those tools together and talk about the hidden cost of carrying it all and why you don't have to carry it alone. Do you remember the first time you held a newborn? Maybe it was your own child, maybe a niece, nephew, maybe a friend's kid. Remember how light they were. About 7 pounds of pure potential that suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000. In that moment, you realized what was on the line. That sensation never fully leaves. You might be hauling lumber or spreadsheets, but your back recognizes the real weight of responsibility. The first episode, we confronted men's mental health. We admitted that exhaustion and anxiety are not signs of weakness, but signs you've been carrying weight too long without help. The comedic part is that us men, we don't like to ask for directions. We'll drive around lost for an hour to avoid pulling over and admitting we're off course. And you laugh because it's true. You might even be laughing now and thinking, who does this guy think he is? I think I'm you, with a microphone. Now pause here. Imagine you're on the forge floor again. The fire is raging, the steel is glowing, and you're sweaty, tired, and yet alive. That's what this work feels like when you're honest about it. You're doing something holy by choosing to improve yourself, even when no one's watching, no one's standing in the background or applauding. But like any blacksmith, you don't get to choose when the bellows blow. Life keeps pumping air into the fire whether you're ready or not. That's why I created the previous episodes. To give you a place to stand when the flames get high. I spoke about journaling and the shame you feel when you think you're the only one who failed. I talked about striking the iron with intention and then quenching it, giving yourself permission to cool down so you don't shatter. We choose our steel, courage, truth, loyalty, responsibility, because those metals don't break when tested. We built handles and guards so you could hold yourself without cutting those around you. And we built sheaths so you could rest your edge without dulling it on the everyday grind. Sound dramatic? It is. And yet, it's as ordinary as making breakfast, going to work, saying sorry to your kid, and telling your wife the truth, even when it scares you. The unfunny truth: responsibility fatigue is real. It's not listed in any medical manual, but you know it better than most physicians. It's the constant low-grade exhaustion of being the one everyone leans on. It's waking up at 3 a.m. because you remember the car needs an oil change, the dog needs shots, the utility bill is due, and your son's science project is nowhere near finished. It's carrying your family in your chest and your job on your shoulders. It's knowing that if you miss one payment, one deadline, the whole house feels like it might collapse. You've been told you're supposed to li- you've been told you're supposed to like this sort of thing. That if you don't enjoy the grind, you must be lazy or ungrateful or not a man at all. But let's laugh at that lie together. Laugh because it's absurd to expect anyone to enjoy being under constant threat of failure. Laugh because humor is a release valve on the pressure cooker. You're allowed to find the absurdity in the load you carry. That doesn't mean you stop carrying it. It means you stop pretending it's light. Humor can be a forge in its own right. A comedian doesn't avoid pain. He turns it into the light hits. He turns it so the light hits it differently. In episode 15, I talked about how noise, societal, relational, internal, can forge character. Think of comedy as another layer of that noise. It's the changing that turns chaos into rhythm. A well-timed joke when you're about to break reminds you you're human. It breaks the tension, diffuses the anger, and makes space for reflection. That's why I'm adding the comedian's eye to today's episode. This doesn't mean we're going to mock your pain or turn it into stand-up. It means we recognize that laughing at ourselves is part of forging resilience. It's a sign of wisdom to notice the ridiculousness of carrying the world on your shoulders like Atlas, while forgetting you can set it down for a minute to stretch. Remember episode 12, the fracture? That was the episode where we admitted that sometimes the steel snaps. I spoke about hitting bottom, about confronting the fracture in your identity when something or someone breaks you open. It was raw, vulnerable, and unpolished. It needed to be. You can't forge without exposing the cracks. But it also could have used a moment of levity. Sometimes when everything falls apart, the only thing you can do is laugh at the pile of parts and begin to rebuild. Not laugh because it's funny, laugh because it's freeing to admit you're not in control of every variable. In a forge, cracks happen because of tension. The way you fix them is by putting the steel back in the fire, welding it, grinding it, shaping it again. In life, you mend by acknowledging your brokenness, asking for help, forgiving yourself, and then laughing at the idea that you ever thought you could do it alone. Remember episode 11 when we talked about brotherhood? Community is the comedian's favorite audience. Jokes are better when shared. Truth is louder when whispered across the table to one trusted friend. Brotherhood doesn't mean we need 12 guys around a campfire quoting movies. Though that helps, I'll be honest. That's one of my favorite pastimes. It means you have at least one other man who won't let you drown silently. In comedy, timing is everything. In brotherhood, so is presence. Showing up on time to your friend's struggle and stay long enough to see him through it. In return, he'll laugh with you when you blow it, remind you you're not the only one, and hand you the hammer when your arms are weak. In episode 16, we talked about standing in who you are. Part of that is owning your sense of humor. It's okay if you're not funny by any conventional definition. Your kids might think you are. Your wife might groan at your jokes, roll her eyes. The point is that a man who can laugh at himself isn't easily humiliated. He knows his worth isn't tied to being perceived as powerful or wise. That brings us back to our core value, humility. Humor and humility come from the same root. They both remind us we're human. They ground us. They prevent us from floating away on clouds of delusion. When you laugh at yourself, you bring yourself back to earth. And that's where forging happens. Now we're looking back to move forward. So, let's look back at episodes like a blacksmith examines his tools. At the end of the day, let's look back at the episodes like a blacksmith examines his tools at the end of a day. Episode 2 taught us to journal and to forgive ourselves. Episode 3 pushed us to choose courage, truth, and loyalty as our steel. Episode 4 named resistance and invited us into the quench. Episode 5 showed you how to polish, build a handle, and a guard for the blade. Episode 6 reminded us to rest and build rituals. Episodes 7 through 10 solidified the process with repetition. Episode 11 invited brotherhood. 12 forced us to confront our fractures. 13 tempered the steel again. 14 explored values under fire through stories. Episode 15 showed us noise shapes character. 16 made us claim our identity. 17 asked us to speak truth to power. And 18 put us in the fire of sacrifice. Each one is a chapter in your journey. They're not just topics I covered because they sounded good. They're a staircase that you climb, one step at a time, often slipping, sometimes sitting on a step and refusing to move. That's okay. What matters is that you keep going. The comedian in me wants to point out that if this journey were a movie montage, this is the part where uplifting music would play while you're shown shots of yourself waking up early, going for a run, hugging your kid, kissing your wife, writing your journey in your journal, blowing up at your coworker, apologizing, and then laughing about how terrible you are at apologizing. It's messy, but the montage gives us hope. In real life, there's no music. There's just your heartbeat and your breath, your laughter and your sighs. We stitch meaning together through story, because otherwise life feels like random scenes. That's what the hero's journey teaches us. It gives structure to the chaos. It reminds us there's a call, a refusal, a crossing, trials, helpers, temptations, an ordeal, a reward, and a return. Your life isn't a neat 12-step program, but the story arc holds true. You leave what's comfortable, you struggle, you grow, and then you return with a gift for those you love, the call to the forge. So here we are. Here you are. You're standing by the furnace again, hammer in hand. You're tired, yes. Of course you are. You might even be smiling because you know what's coming. The weight you've been carrying isn't going away. Your responsibilities are sacred, but you've learned to carry them differently. You've learned to set them down sometimes, to ask for help, to laugh at the absurdity, to lean on your brothers, to pray, to breathe, to journal, to name your values, to forgive yourself, to love your family by being present, not perfect. That's what makes you the giant among men. Not your height, not your bank account, not the number of followers you have on social media, but your capacity to hold weight without losing your soul. One last story. There's an old blacksmith legend that says if you listen closely, you can hear the iron scream when it's hit. Some smiths claim they've heard it laugh. The myth goes that the iron laughs because it knows the pain is temporary and the result will be beautiful. Maybe that's what you'll learn to do when life hits you. Instead of cursing the blow, you'll let out a chuckle. Not because you enjoy suffering, but because you trust the process. You've seen what happens when metal meets fire and hammer and water. You know that you're being shaped into something stronger, sharper, and steadier. So ask yourself, what's in the weight I'm carrying that I haven't named? What is one small thing I can put down for a moment to breathe? Who is one person I need to invite into my journey? What is one lie about masculinity I'm ready to laugh at and leave behind? Would the younger me be proud of the man I am today? If not, why not? What would make him proud? These aren't multiple choice questions. They're invitations into the forge. Don't answer them quickly. Let them simmer. Maybe write them down. Maybe take a walk. Tell a friend. But don't ignore them. If you do, the weight will only grow heavier. Remember, you're not broken. You're not late. You're a man in progress. Every scar, every laugh line, every tear stain on your shirt is proof that you're living. Humor doesn't erase pain. Integrity doesn't eliminate doubt. Brotherhood doesn't guarantee ease. But together they make the weight bearable. Together they turn the grind into glory, the noise into a song, the fire into a forge. We've come full circle. This episode stands on the shoulders of the 18 that came before. It also points to the ones that are coming. Next time, we'll talk about the danger of becoming the mask, about how sometimes what we build to protect us ends up hiding us. Until then, carry your weight with honor. Share your weight with your brothers. And for heaven's sake, don't forget to laugh when the world feels heavy. Because laughter is one of the purest sounds that proves you're still alive. You know this. Listen to a child laugh. Listen to that pure, genuine amusement that comes from a child's laugh. You'll know that you're still alive. You're doing better than you think. Stay in the fire, stay in the forge. And remember, real giants don't shout. They show up. They keep their word. They swing the hammer. They smile in the heat. They cry in the quiet. They laugh at themselves. They start over. They never stop forging. Here's a little bonus. Why I did those episodes. If you've ever binge watched a series and then realized you can't remember anything from episode 3 to 6, you're not alone. Our culture consumes so quickly that we forget to digest. The same thing can happen with podcasts. The same thing can happen with podcasts, with books. The same thing can happen with podcasts or books. You listen while mowing the lawn, on a commute, or while lying awake at 2 a.m. By the time the credits roll, you've moved on to the next thing. That's why I want to slow down and remind you why we did those That's why I want to slow down and remind you why I did those episodes. Episode 1 wasn't just an opening rant about mental health. It was permission to admit you're not okay with feeling weak. Episode 2 used journaling not because it's trendy, but because writing saves men who don't know how to speak their pain. 3 wasn't a lecture on virtues. It was a declaration that courage and loyalty aren't relics. 4 taught you to embrace the quench, because if you never cool down, you burn out. 5 turned a blade into a metaphor for boundaries, because most of us have none. 6 asked you to rest, because if you don't, your body will force you to. 7 through 10 repeated the fundamentals, because mastery comes from repetition, not novelty. 11 used brotherhood as a solve, because isolation kills. 12 named the fracture, because if you don't name your breaking points, they will own you. 12 named the fracture, because if you don't name your breaking points, they will own you. 13 tempered the steel again, because lessons aren't learned once. That's why the old saying is you need at least 10,000 hours. 14 set your values on the fire to prove they're real. 15 showed us noise. 15 showed how noise can forge character, so you can decide which noise to listen to. 16 made you stand in who you are, so you'd stop apologizing for existing. 17 reminded you to speak truth to power, even when your voice shakes, even when you feel like you're not being heard. 18 put you in the fire of sacrifice, because nothing great is forged without cost. Now, a comedian's honesty. Some of those episodes were messy. Some ran long, some topics felt like sandpaper, some metaphors were heavy-handed, and that's part of the charm. Life isn't a perfectly edited story. It's a rough cut. There were moments when I even thought, are we still talking about quenching? Are we still talking about forging? Am I just rambling into the ether for no reason? But every repetition carved a deeper groove. My promise is that moving forward, we'll refine without losing the raw edges. We'll tighten the pacing while keeping space for silence. We'll keep the metaphors, but make sure they serve the story. And I'll continue to weave humor through, because frankly, the forge is more bearable when someone makes a joke about sweat stains on leather aprons than it does without. Think of the entire podcast as a long forge session. Each episode is a strike of the hammer, a dip in the water, a scrape on the stone. The reason we revisit themes is because the metal doesn't shape itself on the first hit. You've come so far already, and the fact that you're still here means you want to keep going. That's worth celebrating. So as you move on from this episode, do it with a smile on your face and steel in your spine. Let the weight remain, but carry it with humor and dignity. If that sounds like contradiction, congratulations. You're finally understanding what it means to be a man in progress. You're not late. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're a man in progress. So let's keep forging. Thank you for joining me on this episode. This one was kind of a reflect on the prior episodes, as you No. The intention of this episode was to bring everything up into a summary. So, you know what's next? We're going to talk about the danger of becoming the mask and how sometimes what we build to protect ends up hiding us. After that, we're going to be starting a new season. I'm going to be a little bit more direct in how to discover values, bring values to the forefront of your mind so that you're constantly thinking about those because values are important. A lot of times people don't realize that it's like the operating system of your life, right? We're going to be starting a new season soon. And in that season, we are going to be doing an overhaul of the value system. So stay tuned, stay up to date, and understand. Stay tuned and stay up to date by hitting that follow. Stay tuned and stay up to date. Hit the follow the podcast button on your major podcast. Stay tuned and up to date. Hit that follow button. Stay tuned and up to date. And depending on where you're watching this from, stay tuned and up to date. And depending on where you're watching this from, hit that follow button or subscribe or whatever it might be. And if you have any questions, feel free to send them in. I might turn them into a full episode. Don't be shy. I'm trying to start a community and I would like for you to join. Send me a message and let's get the conversation going.